was thinking of also just extending this question of what happens intellectually when two different kinds of, as it were, epistemic universes come together, which they do in very everyday terms.
Different systems of
Yes.
knowledge. Yeah.
So if you think about personification, that's one way. I mean, to mention now not a river but land, and I'll come back to the relationship between land and water, which is crucial in your book as well. Think of a modern figure like Bharat Mata, right? To my knowledge, the figure of Bharat Mata does not actually include the Ganges, though it is also a feminine figure. And Bharat Mata, of course, is often portrayed, she and the map of India, since she's a modern figure, occur together, but in such a way that though the figure of Bharat Mata might limn the map of India, she also obscures it at the same time. The modern historians have told us, this is a way of personifying the geography, the colonially invented, if you will, or mapped geography of India. But of course, in some ways, she does no such thing. She obscures that geography. She renders it entirely inexact. You don't know where the boundaries of Bharat Mata territorially are. And I'm just wondering whether the Ganges as well, Ganga, personified, has a similar kind of, she forces you to think differently, even about the river.
In fact, it forces us to think differently about any conception of the nation or of a land, I mean, there's no way you can completely divorce it from what went before. I'm not saying it's all continuity, but there are different ways of thinking about the past. I mean, the earliest Bharat Mata that I know, Abanindranath Thakur's Bharat Mata that he painted, what does it? She has homespun cloth in one hand, the prayer beads, and then she has a sheaf of wheat. Of rice in one hand, right? That is it. It's
the river. Yeah.
That's the. But see, I actually talked about, not in this book, but I have written about amphibious histories. I'm suggesting that all histories are amphibious. Land and water, like Ganga herself, part water, like Shantanu's Ganga. But I think we have become too reptilian. I think we need to get back to the mud and the slime and the in-betweenness of land and water. I mean, I know this can be seen as sort of a cute thing, but actually, I mean, I do believe that anybody who has visited the Sundarbans, anybody who has visited the mud flats, Diamond Harbor down below, I've been to many of these places with, again, my photographer friend, Debal Shen, water and land are in a constant changing relationship, right? I would like to think about it that way as well. And the miracle is simply recognizing the fact that we cannot live one without the other. I mean, both are, part of our sort of sustenance. And I guess different cultures have different responses to that. Babur is just obsessed with, in the Baburnama, obsessed with like how in a land of such plenteous water, why is it not used? And he wonders about this, and he realizes that it's because people have a very different relationship to land,
But in a way, just as, if you will, the figure of Bharat Mata, who's meant to represent land, in a curious way detracts from it.
It's true.
So too the river, and it need not only be the Ganges.
True.
It seems to detract from the very territoriality that apparently makes her existence viable or possible, though of course the reverse has traditionally been the case. It is the water that makes the land possible and not the reverse. So that even those modern Indian thinkers who appear to be focused on India's territoriality, when you look at them more closely, aren't. So to take the example of Savarkar in Essentials of Hindutva, for him, of course, the Indus is both the boundary of India and curiously at the heart of India. It's a conception, first of all, to make a river your boundary, a meandering, mobile thing like a river.
And changing course all the time.
That changes is deterritorializing inherently, but also to have the river at your center and at the edge of the country. He also, of course, says that it is not simply this side of the Indus that is India, but also the other side, therefore discounting the Indus as a boundary at all. In some ways, someone like Savarkar is forced to, or he perhaps willingly does it, um, dwell upon a riverine figure in order to think about India.
Yeah.
He cannot do so only in terms of land, despite more than a century and a half of colonial sociology of knowledge about it. It also strikes me that someone like Nehru, again these liquid metaphors, Nehru in Discovery of India famously, when it comes to describing the territoriality of the country, which of course he's intent on, right? He is bound to protect, can only do so by saying India is that piece of land where the monsoons rain, right? The rain falls, and that is India. So here it's not the river; it's another kind of liquid form that is, as it were, coming from above. So it's a kind
Yeah.
of I think it's more than simply metaphorical. It's a
No, it's visceral.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that, many of our conceptions of territory are so land-bound that we've forgotten that there are other ways of thinking about boundaries and connections. If we stop thinking of river as a boundary and think of river as a conduit between different flows of peoples, right? That's a different map of the world. Today, who are the invaders and who are the indigenous people? Are the Kushanas, who straddle the valley of the Oxus, the Indus, and the upper valley of the Ganges? Which part of them were the invaders and which part of them settled down, as it were? There's so many examples of trans-Himalayan regimes. And after partition, does the river bow to the logic of partition? Right? I mean, it doesn't really. I mean, this is a highly. I'm not getting into the politics of should it or should it not. I'm just talking about, it just doesn't recognize the logic, right, of territorial division that we have created. And that's why migration and migrant populations and folkways and lifeways cannot be contained in that idea.
And yet I wonder if
I'm not saying that the river is a more organic conception and more true, as a geographical metaphor as opposed to land. I mean, landscapes and waterscapes are actually both part of a conception, but there's no neat way of dividing people or territory, especially when you think about a fluvial or riparian landscape. Does that?
Yeah, no, I think you're right, but at the same time, something like partition does change things.
True,
So,
of course.
I mentioned the Indus, which was central not just to Savarkar, but to, all kinds of Indian thinkers, because of course the name India, and you mentioned it. But the Indus, of course, now belongs in a post-partition subcontinent in another country, and is no longer really part of popular Indian imagination, as far as I can tell. It remains a historical desert.
In fact, that generation is actually gone almost. Who would have actually, thought about Lahore and Amritsar as part and parcel of the same,
I mean, Gandhi's, if I'm not mistaken, Gandhi's ashes are scattered in all the great rivers of India, and they include the Indus. So they are taken to Pakistan and scattered there. And it's almost as if the last, the death of the Mahatma and the, as it were, excision of the Indus, which becomes a foreign river suddenly. And it makes you think of the Ganges. Obviously, is always the river, as you put it.
I mean, there's another river that actually has different manifestations in China through the Tibetan plateau and into India. This is the Brahmaputra. We often don't talk about the Brahmaputra, but the Brahmaputra actually is another example of a river that actually is still alive in terms of some continuities and has not been subject to the same kind of national obsession. Actually, again, Dr. Devalsad has taken amazing photographs of the Brahmaputra over the years, and sorry we keep invoking your name, but it's a different rivers have different spirits, if I may say that, and the Brahmaputra in some ways has escaped, and has captured its in its floodplains. And then of course there's Bangladesh and the one branch of the Ganga and the Padma, and we have fought over the Farakka barrage, but that is another interfluvial riverine landscape which is very much part of the great Gangetic Delta. You can, no matter what you say about it from outer space, you cannot see the border. And there's continuities in lifeways and so. But of course, one should not diminish the power and the logic of national divisions. I don't want to do that because it is the way it is, and people today learn that the Indus, this part of it is in Pakistan, and then leads to the very uncomfortable question: the Indus Valley civilization, is that a history of one nation state or the other? And therefore we have all these sort of anxieties about Saraswati Valley and other things, and which lies this part of the border and which lies on the. However silly sometimes it might seem when you're teaching it, it's like, no, there's, thousands of years ago these things didn't matter, but there they are.
Well, it's some way in which, the Indus has lost her sacredness and is no longer part of a more general Indian imagination, and she's lost her sacredness in Pakistan. Not for the Hindu community there, but more generally.
Right.
And with regards to the Ganges, there's also a way in which it's not simply the question of pollution that is always, and you bring it up yourself, advanced to think about a loss of sacredness through our own folly. Right? But that loss then, the idea of our own folly, it's almost, inevitably goes back to a theological world of sin. It is our sin that we are committing towards the river, etc. Yeah. But I just want to think about how the river might be approached and has been approached, given the ending of your talk, by, as it were, non-believers, atheists, non-Hindus, etc. One of the things I discovered in your book was how Akbar and other Mughal emperors had huge barrels or tubs of Ganges water because they only drank Ganges water.
For Akbar from Saran.
Yes. Now, the Mughal emperors might not have said that we only drink Ganges water because we believe it is sacred. They may have had, as it were, a or a proto-scientific vision of it, that it has health-giving properties.
Well, the word that is used in the Aini Akbari, Abe Hayat, has his
water of life.
Water of life, and has a sense of eternity to it, is a little bit more than simply medicinal, right? Yeah. I mean, there's something else to it. It's almost as if the sacred, whoever it's sacred for, Jains, water cult people, snake cult, it kind of rubs off of everything else, So sacrality is not the preserve of one particular culture or one particular people. It is there. It's like water. It leaks into everything. Yes. And so that leakage is something I'm very interested in, if that makes any sense,
No, that is precisely what I was gesturing towards, the impossibility of drawing boundaries.
Yes.
The river itself cannot form a boundary, as Savarkar found out or realized.
I hadn't thought about Savarkar's conundrum in this particular case.
But it's fascinating. It's really, how does something get to be both a border and a center? Just as the Ganges, how does it get to be in one place, but it is in fact everywhere? Yeah. Like Krishna, or like, the problem of not the problem, it is a blessing of multiplication.
It's too bad that nation states don't get to choose their own geographies.
Yes.
It would be very convenient. Yeah. Geography is very inconvenient for certain kinds of nations.
And the liquid nature of this, which is inevitable because it's if you will, it's an inheritance of Indian history. There is no way anyone can ignore the importance of this and other rivers. And not simply because of their life-giving properties, but because of the enormous store of mythology, etc., ritual that exists and continues to be practiced on the banks of these rivers. So, I'd like to just end with one particularly nice example, if you will, of an unbeliever's vision of the Ganges. And this is Akbar Allahabadi, the poet from this city, Allahabad.
We have shared this story.
Yes. Akbar Allahabadi was a devotee of Gandhi's. And in 1920 or 21, I forget which, when the non-cooperation movement is launched, he's really excited, and he writes in Urdu a text
Gandhinama.
called the Gandhinama, which is a kind of, he writes comic or ironical poetry often.
But
And
it's
so
very
this is,
patriotic,
it's very
Ganga.
patriotic because
Yeah.
he was a friend. This is a question of translation, right? So Akbar al-Abadi was a friend of Motilal Nehru. Akbar al-Abadi's house was called Ishrat Manzil. Motilal Nehru, when he built his house, called it Anand Bhavan, which is a translation of Ishrat Manzil. Both of these words are translations of each other, which goes back to this question of duality. In the Gandhinama, he writes about Muslims joining the Congress, that for too long, the water of Zamzam, which is the water you bring from Mecca,
In that famous well.
the sacred water, which you may have seen if you have ever had the fortune or misfortune of being in an airport in Hajj time, which is coming around now, and you'll see these canisters, these jerry cans of, plastic things of Zamzam water coming into the baggage carousel. And Akbar says, for too long has the water of Zamzam been trapped in these bottles. Let it now flow free with the Ganges. That the freedom of India resides in the flow of the Ganges. It's not simply a statement of
The line is
yeah,
शीशे
yeah,
में
yeah,
बंद थे हम
yeah, yeah.
of गंगा में रवाना आ
Ravan,
गई
yes,
रवानगी
yeah,
आ गई.
yeah, yeah.
We finally
It's the
found
flow,
life in the flow of the Ganges. It's a very nice
yeah.
couplet. Yeah.
And I don't think it's simply a kind of cliched vision
No.
of tolerance or syncretism or anything. It's about freedom. It's not simply about sharing.
Yeah.
And that freedom is only possible in this way. And yet, of course, it's not about belief.
Yeah.
And the movement he was writing about, non-cooperation, Khilafat, in Gandhi's view, of course, was similar.
I can capture this duality of course, in Iqbal's famous Tarana Hind, which before it became Tarana Milli,
Sare,
where he
Sara
says that I'm sure you remember Sare Jahan Se Acha, that line, Aabe Rude Ganga, oh, the waters of the Ganges. ए वतन याद है तुझको उतरा तेरे किनारे जब कारवां हम when our caravans alighted for the first time on your shores. Now he could be talking about who? How many caravans have alighted on Ganges shores from how many centuries? It is not really just about Muslims, right? It in fact, it very well could have been Aryans. He was talking about Aryans, and that kind of an idea actually is actually resistant to the idea of one people. I mean, if there's one metaphor for people on the move and one metaphor defines of borders, it is the caravan train, right? And in peculiarly in that poem, I think the affect of that is really about not just the borders of a geographical space, but the opening up the geographical space, right? And I think that's in the romance of the nation itself, that Rabindranath, one body, we have received all these things, and I think that, it's time for us to maybe just recognize that without that openness and without that, the freedom that rivers give us, we would have a very impoverished notion of the nation as a bounded space.
No, I just focusing on the river as you do so nicely in this book, it brought to mind, we have had an entire, as it were, mini industry, very good one too, among historians of the making of India's territoriality and nationality, all of which is of course very important. And yet running through it is this figure of mobility and changeability. And as Akbar Allahabadi noticed, that is where freedom lies. So that the nation can never be, because he was talking about the first mass mobilization of the national movement, nothing less than that. This is really the nation coming into being for the first time from 1919. This is the centenary. Sadly, it's not been commemorated, but 1919 is the centenary.
Of the non-cooperation.
Yes, of non-cooperation movement. And I think it takes the Ganga to bring that to mind. As you say so nicely in your book, the mobility is not always something good. The river can run in many directions.
And flood and destroy. Yeah.
But it is the reverse of a notion of stasis.
Yeah.
And with that, I think we should open
I think
up
we should ask
for
people for.
questions.
I just want to say that it's always been the river has always been the amphibious pulse of history, and without the amphibious pulse, there is no history.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Faisal. Do we keep I'm sure. Or comments or suggestions or please.
Form in the subcontinent is now being exported to the world in the sense of the Anthropocene, that we feel guilty that we are polluting the
Yes.
planet in a certain sinful way. And it's the same duality you were talking about, that you do it routinely and don't care about it. And
I
there are
know.
certain moments when you sacralize the whole thing and say, my God, I'm in a state of sin. Need
Yes.
purification.
Yes.
We've exported that to the whole planet, it seems. That
Wow.
was one thing. And the other thing is, when you ask about the Indus being both a boundary and at the heart, if you think of Indonesia or any other archipelago, the sea is